Hello everybody, how are you all? Welcome to our today's session on the uses of semicolon. Today we are going to have a discussion on the use of semicolons as a part of our learning the use of punctuation marks. We will have several sessions on the use of punctuation marks. For today we are discussing the use of semicolon. So, do you remember which one is the semicolon? How does it look? I believe all of you can remember, but yet I simply tried to remind you of what a semicolon looks like. This is how a semicolon look like. I'm sure you all can recognize it. Now, where do we use semicolons? That is a very important question because uses of semicolon becomes a little difficult for many of us. We become confused about the use of comma and semicolon. So, where do we use semicolons? Where to use? We will point to two specific things and then we will go on to the principles of using semicolons, and then we will give some examples so that you can understand it properly. So here we go. The first thing is to mark a break that is stronger than a comma but not as final as a full stop. You know, full stop, we use full stop after a complete sentence. When we finish speaking a full sentence, we use a full stop. And for tiny short break in a sentence, we use comma. But for semicolon, the break has to be a little stronger than the comma and a little weaker than a full stop. So that is what we mean by to mark a break that is stronger than a comma but not as final as a full stop. The break should be stronger than a comma. The break should be a little longer than where we use comma, and the break should not be as full, as final as a full stop. Okay, and that is the ideal understanding of using a semicolon. But to be specific, we use semicolon between two main clauses. You know clauses, right? Clauses are the parts of sentences which can be used particularly when they are independent clauses or main clauses. Those clauses can be used as a full sentence, but they are somehow joined together to make a sentence. So between two main clauses which make a complete sentence, if they are very closely logically connected and cannot be separated, they do not deserve to be separated as two distinct sentences. Between these two clauses we use semicolon, and after the completion of the two clauses we use a full stop. So between two main clauses means two independent clauses that balance each other and are too closely linked to be made into separate sentences. For this place we use semicolon. So now we will go on to the principles of use. Principles we have already given, but for now we are going to be very specific about the principles and the examples of use. Okay, so here we go. The principle is between items in a list or series if any of the items contain commas. So mark the words items in a list or series. So there has to be a series or a list, and you know every list or series has some items in it. So if we have to write a list or a series, and if the items are separated with commas, then we use semicolon between the items. Now let us take the example on the right side of the table. With the first sentence, I love my friend Anik, who is a good football player, Zubair, who is a wonderful storyteller, Sabir, who is a passionate reader, Tony, who is an athlete. In this sentence, if you focus a little, you will see that the sentence gives a list of some friends: Anik, Jubair, Sabir, and Tony. And all these four items in the list are separated with some commas, with 4 commas. Now, to separate the items, we have to use semicolons. Just look at the sentences. I love my friend Anik. After Anik, we have used comma, who is a good football player. Here one item ends, so we use semicolon here. Zubair, we use a comma, and who is a wonderful storyteller. The second item ends here, and the third item, Sabir, takes a comma after it, who is a passionate reader. The third item ends here, and we use a semicolon there. And finally, we use full stop after the sentence gets completely said. The same thing happens in second example. Just take a look at it. There are basically 2 ways to write. Here we have a full list with a colon. There are basically 2 ways to write a colon, because we use colon to note a list or a series. So in this list or in this series, we have pen and pencil, and just go a little down, you will see computer and printer. So there are 2 items in this series. So after, there are basically 2 ways to write. With a pen or pencil, we use a comma, which is inexpensive and easily accessible. Here ends the first item in the list, so there we use semicolon. Or by computer and printer, we use a comma, which is more expensive but quick and neat. So see, when the first item ends in the list, we use a semicolon. So that is what we were saying, between items in a list or series, if any of the items contain commas. Okay, let us go on to the next. Yes, linking two independent clauses. Look at the examples. Let us take the first example. Some people like Windows, some other like Linux or Mac. We can see that in this sentence we have 2 independent clauses, 2 main clauses. We have two clauses, and both of the clauses are main, independent. So we are marking them. Think a little about it. These 2 clauses can be written into sentences. They can be somehow, but they are so logically connected, so deeply connected, that if we write them into 2 different sentences, then they may not sound good. So we use a semicolon between them to mark that they are distinct principal clauses, but they somehow make a complete sentence. Some people like Windows, semicolon, some other like Linux or Mac. The second example, if we take, the food looked very delicious. I couldn't wait to eat it. If we take it very loosely, we can say that the food looked very delicious, and then we can use a full stop here, and I couldn't wait to eat it. But that way of writing it will not make it logically connected. So to mark the logical connection between these 2 independent clauses, we use semicolon here. Okay, let us go on to the next one. Between two independent clauses connected by transitional phrases or words. We've talked about marking two independent clauses, but here we have got an addition, transitional phrase or words. So what are these transitional phrases and words? You understand that transition means to make a transition from one idea to another. So the phrases or the words that helps us to shift from one part of the speech to another part of the sentence is called transitional phrase. If you look at the example, I have marked the phrases and a word in blue color here. As a result, you see the phrase as a result in blue color. Okay, so now let us go through the text once. However they choose to write, people are allowed to make their own decisions. However they choose to write, people are allowed to make their own decisions. As a result, many people swear by their writing methods. The sentence itself says that when people are given their options to make their own decisions about writing, they prefer their own choice of writing. So since the second part, I mean the second main clause of the second independent clause of the sentence has a transitional phrase which is as a result, we use semicolon before the transitional phrase, I mean as a result. When we make this transition between the ideas of two independent clauses, we mark the transition with semicolon. So before the transitional phrase as a result, we have to use semicolon. Let us go on to the next sentence. We practiced hard, consequently we scored high in the final examination. So see, the first independent clause, we practiced hard, and the second independent clause, we scored high in the final examination. You see there is a transitional word which is consequently. So to mark that transition which is created by consequently, we need to use a semicolon before consequently. We practiced hard, semicolon, consequently we scored high in the final examination. Now we understand that if we use commas in the place of semicolon, that will fail to mark the strength of break between the parts of the sentences. So we are going to have a discussion on that problem that is called comma splices. So what is a comma splices? I have already told you that where the break is stronger than a comma, if we use a comma there, that creates comma splice. Comma splice is an incorrect way of punctuation marks. So therefore if we say I'm thinking of skipping English class, it's really boring. See, I have marked the comma here in red color. I'm thinking of skipping English class. If we put a comma here, it's really boring. It will be a wrong use of the use of comma, and this use of comma is called comma splices. Now how do we fix this? We already know that these two parts should have I'm thinking of skipping English class, semicolon. It's really boring because these two parts, these two independent clauses, I'm thinking of skipping English class, is a complete independent clause. It's really boring. But see, when we say these two independent clauses, we say it so closely that they are hardly remarkable that they are, I mean, they are hardly remarkable that they are separate sentences, because they are logically connected. They are very much coherent. So to punctuate these two coherent, logically connected independent clauses, we need semicolon, not a comma. So this is all about our discussion on the use of semicolon. I hope you have enjoyed it. And remember this when you are writing, because you will need this punctuation mark in your practical life, not only in your exams. Remember one thing, as I always tell you, that learn things so that you can use them in your practical life. Doing good in exams is just one thing, but that is not all. What you learn from the academy, from your classes, remember always that those things you will need your practical life. So learn it for your practical life's sake. Thank you. Take care and study hard. Make use of this course time in the best possible way. Thank you very much.